welcome to the next episode of the Raise Guitars podcast. And I'm really pleased to have somebody I'd like to call a friend of mine, Andrew Tate, who's come to talk to me today. He's got an amazing guitar collection and he's a really good guitarist. So, Andrew Tate, welcome.
Thank you.
So I'm just going to ask you some questions and then we'll just have a chat and we'll see where it goes.
Sounds good to me.
And at the end, we'll pop out the other side. So, what first drew you to the guitar right at the beginning?
So, I'm of an age that I grew up in the sort of 60s and 70s, and I was very fortunate that my parents got me in. We had a piano in the house, and my parents got me involved in piano lessons when I was about 7. And so I went through some piano lessons, but then punk came along, and I'd been into bands like Shawaddy Waddy and things like that, which were pretty, horrible to
I remember them. I liked them when I was about 8.
Yeah, they had great album sleeves with those crepe-soled shoes on the front. But punk came along, and basically I just wanted to play the Ramones. So I was fortunate to see Ramones and a couple of the punk, big punk bands. So I just desperately wanted to play guitar.
You saw the Ramones?
I did see the Ramones.
Where was that?
That was in Newcastle City Hall. And honestly speaking, I can see it like, it was yesterday. It was such a fantastic, fantastic gig.
A groundbreaking moment. Brilliant.
Yeah.
So what was your first guitar?
So the first guitar was, now what was it? It was a red one. And actually so I can remember so 2 things. I can remember very sad going to Edinburgh with my parents because I lived up in the northeast, and we went into a music shop before I had a guitar, and we bought a red guitar strap, which I've still got. And as you do, I used to put that on, stand in front of the mirror, and imagine there was a guitar on the end of it. But I do remember going to Newcastle for my first guitar, and I think that it was a Fresher Mustang. So it was a copy of a Mustang, and it was pretty rubbish, but it was red and it had strings on. It was fantastic.
I've seen a picture of that, actually. Yeah,
Yes.
I remember that. But you've got the strap, but not the guitar.
I got the strap, but not the guitar. Yeah. I had a little way to go to persuade them to buy me a guitar.
Okay, so after the fake Mustang, what came next?
So I was still at school at this point, and I was playing in sort of our music department, which at the time was all about sort of brass bands and things, and I'd graduated from piano and guitar. Also was playing the an instrument called the E-flat bass, which is basically a tuba. So I was lugging that to school and back. But anyway, got in with sort of the music teacher, and we had a sort of jazz orchestra. Anyway, there was a guy who was in a couple of years above me who had an Aria Pro 2 guitar, which he was selling. And so I persuaded my parents that if I sold the red one, I could get that Aria Pro 2. And actually, I've still got it. And I've sort of looked back into the history of it, what with, vintage guitars being a thing. And it was made in quite a famous factory, I think, in Japan back then. So, and I think the pickups are supposed to be quite good. So it's not one that I play a lot, but I've still got it and treasure it.
Brilliant. So, and have you kept... Was there a point in time where you kept all your guitars? Because I know you've got a lot of guitars.
Yes.
And was that the first one?
That was the first one that I
you kept everything since?
I've kept everything apart from I mean, I shouldn't have them all, but selling guitars is, not the easiest thing in the world. And I did try a few years ago to sell a couple of them, and I had a white one, which was, I can't even remember what make it was, but it was a white one with a Floyd Rose pointy neck. I was never playing it, so I sold it, and I had to send it to Italy for the guy who wanted to buy it, and it just put me off really. So,
did it arrive? Did he get it?
He did get it, yeah. All went absolutely fine. But yeah, it's just a pain in the backside. And the thing is that, as I'm sure we'll talk about, I played in a covers band for many years, and you just sort of, when you're in a band like that, you just sort of think, oh, I might want this and I might want that. So I've just accumulated guitars, and there are some that I don't play that I should really sell.
Okay, so let's talk about then. At what point did you start in a band, and how many guitars had you accumulated before you started in the band?
Good question. So basically, I played in a band at school, and I still remember, playing on our sort of school stage, playing. I think "We Will Rock You" was one of the numbers.
Queen.
Yeah. Doctor UFO, and can't really remember many others. I think Radar Love was one that we were trying as well. So, and I can also remember being on the school stage, actually doing the lights for another band when one of the guitarists got electrocuted because he touched the microphone stand, and I had to yank the mains out and shut the band down because this guy was being electrocuted.
Oh my god.
Yes. So that taught me the importance of earthing and making sure equipment was wired properly. So anyway, so school, I was in a band. I was in our sort of jazz orchestra, with this Aria Pro 2, and then I moved to London. And I was very fortunate. After a couple of years in London, I joined a band, and we played in pubs around Croydon. And so I used the Aria Pro 2 pretty much during that time. I think I only had kind of the one guitar down here. And it wasn't until probably, I'm going to say, a bit later on that I started to really accumulate things. But I was always at that time, I'd seen Thin Lizzy with Gary Moore in Newcastle as well. And, the Les Paul was really what I sort of aspired to. That was, my dream guitar.
Okay, so when was your first Les Paul?
So my first Les Paul was, I bought it in 1994, I think. I'd had a good year at work. I was still sort of training and stuff, and I had enough to go to Denmark Street and to buy a Les Paul. And so I got a 1977 Custom, which you've seen.
That's the one I've worked on. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, so I got that. I think I bought it for about £500 at the time, which was a lot of money to me. And I've still got it, and still very much, again, treasure it.
It's that. I mean, that guitar is amazing. I did a little video on it. The thing that there was two things about that. One was when I opened it up, I don't think the back had ever been taken off, and it smelt like, I don't know, it's literally age just came out of it. It was a weird smell. But the second one was like the neck, the fretboard was so perfectly flat. Amazing.
Yeah. And I have had it, serviced, and I think I might have said to you that, at some point, I used to live up in southeast London. I had to take it to a music shop because the original paint on the neck basically started to go a bit tacky. And I think that the guitar, that guitar was quite interesting because actually you will have seen that the tuners on it were quite pock-marked. And and actually all of the sort of the hardware on it was quite sort of pockmarked when I bought it. And I talked to the guy in the shop about it, and he said, honestly speaking, it's probably because somebody with ginger hair played with it and sweated it, and and the acid in their sort of body, had got onto the paintwork and onto the metalwork, and had corroded it a bit. So whether that also happened to the neck or not, I don't know. But I had it re-lacquered and all that sort of stuff, and it's lasted well.
Well, it looks amazing. Oh, you can't tell.
Mm.
Yeah, the lacquer on it's brilliant.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of your guitars. Keep going. What else have you got?
But what else have I got? So I guess the interesting thing about Les Paul was, love the Les Paul. It is obviously really heavy. It is humbuckers, and it has its place. But I started to get into a covers band where we were playing a huge variety of different music, and so at some point I went along to this sort of music shop in Bromley, where I used to live, and the guy had a Strat, a Mexican Strat, on the wall, and I played it and I really enjoyed it. And then, honestly speaking, this Strat just sort of took over from everything else. It became my absolute workhorse. Loved it, really did. So it was a pink Mexican Strat. Again, still got it, and the only thing that I found about it was that the bridge pickup was single coil. It was very bright and didn't really sort of suit me. So at some point, can't quite remember how long I'd had it, but I replaced it with a Seymour Duncan Hot Rails. And that just worked absolutely. The balance between the pickups, without me really sort of doing a lot of, didn't do any sort of heavy electronics. I just took one out and put the other one in. And it just lifted, that top end, gave me the boost that I need. So that worked really, really well.
So, and you've got you've been a big Strat fan ever since, I think, haven't you?
Yeah, I have. Well, I have. I mean, it's only recently that I was very fortunate in that I've got a Silver Sky, and that was an interesting experience because I went along to Anderton's actually to look for one, and the guy in there sort of he gave me. Had a bit of money, I was had a big birthday, and he sort of gave me a custom shop Strat, and he gave me the Silver Sky, and he said, he sort of leaned me towards the Silver Sky and said, it is really, really good. They're really good sort of value for money and for what you get, and it is gorgeous. I think I still wonder to myself whether I may bombed better, with a custom shop, but it is a gorgeous guitar. And then I've also got a parts caster, one that I bought from eBay a few years ago, which has got piezo pickups in it as well, so you can do that sort of acoustic thing as well.
Is that the one that's got the funky pick guard?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you
it's also got that one's also what really attracted me to that was it's got the Gilmore switch as well, where you can bring the neck pickup into the other configurations.
Okay, so when you went to get the Silver Sky, you went to Anderton's. Did you went in the special room upstairs? Did you?
Yeah.
With like about £1 billion worth of really expensive guitars.
Absolutely, and I think he gave me the Bad Cat amps to play through, which are obviously to die for as well. So,
amazing.
It was.
I've been in there a few times and walked in, and you just walk around with your mouth open, going,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and and I literally had about 4 or 5, these sort of gorgeous axes around that I was playing. So quite a difficult decision.
Yeah. I bet.
Yeah.
And the Silver Sky one. But, it's amazing.
But the other, in the Fender line, I've never really been into tellies. probably something that I've missed, because obviously, sort of going from a Les Paul to really, really enjoying a Strat, I probably haven't really engaged with a Tele enough. But I did quite a while ago get a G&L Tele. So I've got that. Haven't done anything with it in terms of, changing anything. And again, the pickups on that are really nice. So when I do get that out and play it, I absolutely love it.
Brilliant. Give us a few more unusual ones.
So I've got an Epiphone Explorer, which again, I think you've had a look at, which I swapped out the pickups. So the Epiphone pickups I didn't feel were really sort of gritty. So I think I put Seymour. No, did I put?
Yeah, it's got Seymour Duncan's in it.
Seymour Duncan's in it, is it? And then I've also got a Moore guitar, which has got that they're sort of renowned for having piezo pickups in, and they actually hook up with Roland synths really well.
Okay.
So you may not have seen that one.
No,
so it's a Les Paul shape. I think it's called a J2000. And so I've used a Roland. So the pink Strat that I played in the band, I kind of really got into experimenting with other things. So I put a Roland piezo thing on there, or one of their sort of pickups for their synths. So I was sort of using that a bit in the band, a bit more flexibility on tone as well. And then actually I was in Dublin, and I came across this Moore guitar, and brought it home with me, as you do. So basically it's two humbuckers, fairly sort of standard Les Paul type of setup, but it's also got the Roland, like, I don't know how many pins plug in the bottom where you plug in the synth, and it's effectively sort of MIDI type sound. So that's really good. So that was one, I think, where I replaced the pickups on that one. Again, I didn't feel that they were really biting, so I replaced them with bare knuckles.
Okay.
Back in the day. So yeah, I haven't replaced pickups for a long time, actually. I went through a phase of like, buy the Epiphone or something, and then let's just
buy a guitar and then spend even more money on the pickups than you spent on the guitar. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. I know you've got more. You've got more. Keep going.
Yes. So I've got. So at one point, I love Slash, obviously, which is where the Les Paul sort of that really amplified my Les Paul love. So obviously, his alternative guitar is a BC Rich. So I got myself one of those. I think probably the cheaper end of that, the range of that. But that's quite good fun. Lots of knobs and dials on it and stuff, which I've never really sort of got into. So I don't really use that one very much. It's got nice Floyd Rose, but the action on it, you haven't had that one, have you, Darren?
I haven't had that one. It's a wacky looking thing. But it's really cool, isn't it? It's really 80s.
Yeah, exactly. So I'd love to get into that a bit more. I also love Steve Vai. So at some point I got one of the cheaper end of the gems, which has got the gems have got the sort of the flower going up the
inlays on the fretboard.
Yes, going up the fretboard. And this one, I think, because it's the cheaper version, has only got half of that. But again, back in the day, sort of messing around with that, it had the Floyd Rose on that. I think was an Edge Floyd Rose or something, and renowned not to be very good. So I replaced that, but kind of miscalculated a little bit on it, because the block underneath sort of sticks out the back. So got to be careful with that one. But it works really well, and it's much better than what was on there already. So that's good. And then I think more recently I was just looking at, I think it was eBay, and saw a really nice Joe Satriani Ibanez as well. So I got that, but that one was really weird, because I bought it, and hadn't quite sort of sussed out that it didn't have the Floyd Rose or any way of putting the Floyd Rose on. So it's a hardtail. But really lovely. You get some of those with the pickups. You get some of those lovely sort of Satriani sounds coming.
That's the gold one that I've seen.
Yeah,
and that's got the weirdest but coolest looking hardtail bridge I've ever seen.
Yeah. It's almost like, it looks a bit like a Floyd Rose tail, but it's not. So yeah.
Okay.
So
you've got more. Keep going.
Have I got more?
Yeah, you have.
I've got a Jackson, which again sort of came from probably I'm going to say the 90s. Again, haven't used it that much, but that's got a Floyd Rose on it. I think it was my first guitar with the Floyd Rose. So that's good. And then from an acoustic point of view, just to move acoustic, I've got I've got another two actually that I need to talk about. So when I was at school, so I bought an acoustic guitar from my art teacher at school, who was in this sort of was very active in the music department, but he taught art, and so I've got a Fender acoustic guitar from the 70s from him, which is really nice. And then I went to the States at some point, went to North Carolina, and then came across a Takamine in a shop that I just couldn't leave there. So I brought that back to the UK and got into all sorts of trouble with customs when I came back, because they thought I'd bought it new and then scuffed it, to try and bring the value down for customs purposes. So that was quite interesting.
Okay, but you got away with it.
Yeah, got away with it. And then the other two, I think the other two guitars that I hadn't mentioned, one was that, again, in the 90s, in this shop in southeast London, I saw that they had in there one time a Gibson SG, sorry, not a Gibson SG, a Yamaha SG, and that is a limited edition that I think was a 1996 anniversary, and it's one of a number, so it's one of 200 or something like that. So that's a sort of proper, really, really heavy Carlos Santana type of SG. And then more recently, I went to the Isle of Wight festival, and on the Isle of Wight there was a music shop, and my friends who I went with persuaded me to buy a 345.
You didn't tell me about that.
Yeah. So I've got a Gibson 345, which is quite a new one. It's like from 2000 or something like that. But
okay, brilliant. Okay, so what I'm going to do before we talk amps and effects, because they probably come better after talking music influences and your playing in bands. Let's go right back to what's your key musical influences that got you into playing guitar.
So as I said in the beginning, punk was the start of that. And it's such an easy way to sort of get into playing chords and bar chords and, Ramones type stuff, Pistols, all of that sort of stuff. But then sort of within a couple of years, really, punk didn't sort of last that long, really, as the original punk. And then you got bands like Def Leppard, Saxon, the new wave of heavy metal came out, saw Def Leppard on their first ever tour. And I think I saw Saxon as well, and Marillion, bands like that. So I, sort of got more into metal, got into Rush at that point as well. And so, I didn't see them at that point. And so, that was sort of when I started, I suppose, to get more into blues rock type of music, and really just go on from there. I mean, I love all sorts of music. I can remember, after punk, I also got into reggae quite a bit. Love Bowie. So when I moved down to London, I became kind of a new romantic, had my hair right down here and used to wear trench coats and all that sort of stuff. Got some horrendous photos. So so lots of influences, but really that rock thing, has come through it all. And yeah, that's been really my main influence.
Okay, and I know because I've spoken to you a number of times. Thin Lizzy's quite a big
Yeah,
thing
yeah,
for you.
yeah. I mean, seeing, again, I can still sort of see myself in, with Phil Lynnett's, bass with the mirror on it, shining it around the auditorium, and, Gary Moore and Scott Gorham. I mean, I love Gary Moore anyway. I actually absolutely rate Scott Gorham. I think the obviously Live and Dangerous wasn't Gary Moore, it was Brian Robertson, but on Still in Love with You, that track, you get Brian Robertson playing a solo first, and then Scott Gorham comes in with his, and Scott Gorham's tone is just to die for. It's so fluid and round and, absolutely gorgeous. And actually, I've read more recently that he had his Les Paul in Thin Lizzy had those little mini humbuckers. I wonder whether that contributed to the tone that he had. But yeah, Thin Lizzy, absolutely loved them.
Okay, brilliant. Did you ever have the hair for Scott Gorham?
No. Well, I that photo that you reminded me of was probably the longest that it goes. But my hair, when it sort of gets down to here, just goes out.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right, that's good. A good look. Right, so getting back into cover bands then. So you started quite young, but I know you've been in bands for a long, long time. Tell us a bit more about that.
So I obviously school band, and then when I came down to London and got to Croydon, I had a very good friend who was who's an actor, and he had a band. He sort of sang, was the lead man, so I played guitar in that, and that lasted probably for about 3 or 4 years, and then probably there was a break of maybe about 5 years. And then actually a really good friend of mine who, we knew, my wife and I knew as a couple, he literally came round to my house one day, and we were having dinner, and he said, "Oh, I've sort of sung a little bit." And he sang Donna by Donny Osmond, and just knew that he had an astounding voice, that he'd never done anything with it, never had lessons or anything like that. So I said to him, "Oh, we've got to do some recording together." So we actually did recording on one of the little sort of 4-track cassette recorders, and probably with a drum machine. I think I had one keyboard, and it was basically double tracking the tracks, so you couldn't go back and do. There was no DAW or anything like that in those days. So we wrote some music together, and we did that stuff. And I remember we played as a duo at his wedding, so that you could sort of show off to his friends, and it, absolutely brilliant. And then I met up with some other guys that I worked with, and we formed this band. And he's just developed into the most astounding frontman I've ever played with. He's a brilliant voice, great frontman, really good looking bloke, and could turn his hand to anything. So I was in that band for 12, 13 years. And we weren't so much it was more of a party band. So we did weddings and functions and work events, rather than sort of going around pubs. But it was absolutely brilliant.
Okay, so where does that bring you up to?
That brings me. So when that finished was probably, I'm going to say, about 2012.
So not that long ago.
No. He got a. The singer went off abroad with a new job, and it sort of folded around that time. But it was, absolutely amazing.
So by then, I guess towards the end of that band, you'd have built up a good selection of amps and effects.
Yeah.
Tell us what you've been using.
Yeah. So interestingly, when I think when I first got my a first amp, seem to remember it. I mean, I've probably, got rid of stuff that was, now I would dream to have. I seem to remember having sort of a Selmer valve amp at some point, which I think are, quite revered. But the amp that I really had that sort of took me through was actually a solid state PV Bandit that I think was I'm going to say a 60 watt. So solid state, and it did the job. I was never sort of really bowled over, but in hindsight, it was probably quite a good sound. And I've sort of seen people nowadays, sort of twinning up a solid state amp with a valve amp, and you get that blend of sound. So anyway, so I had that, and I think I got two of those PVs at some point. So I was sort of experimenting with stereo stuff, and then the next amp that really sort of the main amp that I started to use was a Marshall, a JCM 900. So I used that, and I had or have still got a Marshall cabinet, a 2x12
Okay.
cabinet, and that chucks out enough for any gig that I was doing. Didn't need to be mic'd up or anything.
Okay. Well, what about effects? What were you using live back then? Because I know you've shifted a bit. Sort of, you've become more modern now. So.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Yeah. So it is interesting, I suppose. Through the cover band, I was quite an early adopter of digital stuff. So line 6 in particular, and I've had 3 line 6 boards going back. I can't remember what the original. I've still got all 3 of them, obviously.
Of course you have.
But the first one was quite flexible. The second one was the HD 500. I think the one before that was called the X Live or something. Really sturdy bit of kit, and quite adaptable in terms of how it worked. So, but before that, I think, as I've shown you, I did have sort of various pedals, but probably didn't really know how to use them, and I'm of a generation that came from not having YouTube. So the stuff that we were learning, was very much sort of experimentation. I didn't have lessons. So the concept of stacking gain pedals, or, where you would put a chorus pedal in a signal chain, none of that was, anywhere near my sort of psyche. And obviously I wasn't really able to afford sort of, Roger Mayer type effects pedals. It was very much sort of Boss, and so I've got a historic collection of Boss. I think I showed you the OD2, I think it is, the turbo overdrive Boss, which I can remember getting, and really, really useful. But I think that for me, getting into digital, especially in a covers band, just gave me that flexibility to be able to just go through and program in, because we'd be going from the Stones to funk to I don't know, stereophonics, and all the different sounds. So be able to dial those in quite easily was the kind of the way I went. And I guess that actually, again, watching YouTube and watching guitarists who are in covers band and they talk about what they're doing, actually probably I might have been better off sticking with sort of a smaller number of pedals, and actually just getting the feel of a sound, and then embellishing it with chorus or delay or something like that. But you just do what you do.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what appeals to me, though, because, I mean, you've seen my pedal board is the old school, lots of pedals, lots of dials and knobs. It's every time you get it out of the box, I've got a 10-year-old in the house, and everything is completely out of whack.
Yes.
And you've got to sit there and retype, and you just press a button.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing, that I mean, certainly, I do remember when we would do the typical thing of, two sets. So you'd have, 25 songs, something like that, and then a few for encores. And, and I would spend time before gigs, just making sure that, they were in order, I could dial them in. But the thing is, it is that thing, Darren, when people say, you can finesse your sound, and in the bedroom or studio or whatever, you can finesse the sound. Actually, when you get to a gig, you just want something that's going to sound fitting to the song. So the stuff that I was using, the patches for distinctive sounds, I think were pretty good. They probably weren't the best sounds, that I could possibly get if I was going for analog stuff or whatever. But they worked in the gig situation, and they were quite controllable as well.
Yeah, excellent.
Mm.
Something jumps into my head and it jumps out again, which is a bit strange. What's your favourite setup? So if you out of all of your gear, and you've got to pick an amp, an effect, and one of your guitars.
Okay.
What do you go with?
Oh, good point. So yes. So there's probably two other bits of gear that I haven't talked about that I need to talk about, because that will be my favourite. So I was very fortunate a couple of years ago, because a guitarist who I follow quite actively is a guy called Ed Clark, and he's in a band called Brave Rival. Love them, saw them at the Isle of Wight festival, and followed them ever since. And Ed's a brilliant guitarist, and he, at one point, so he was playing a Victory Countess head, and he was putting that through a Mesa Boogie cabinet. But at some point, he was selling the head, and he was also selling the Victory Sheriff, which was the sort of the preamp pedal thing that they've got. So he was selling the two of them, and I snapped those up. So and the Victory head is just absolutely brilliant. I love the sound of that. It's clean, loads of headroom, really gorgeous sound. So that is my current setup, and really love the sound of that. I actually prefer it to the Marshall. I think the Marshall's it's a Marshall for classic rock sort of sounds, and I've now got more into the clean amp, and then you put the pedals in. So my setup would be really the amp and the cabinet are that. I also got last year a Revstar. A Yamaha Revstar with P90s, which I've never had before. Absolutely love that, and that's really, really flexible. So I think that into the Victory would be the guitar and amp combination. So beyond that, I've been getting more into pedals. So I use, as a number of people do, an HX Stomp for the sort of the wet effects. But gain wise, I've started to play a bit more around. So I got a Thorpe, the Danish Pete Thorpe gain pedal, which is an overdrive and a boost, and that works really well. I also got another Thorpe, which is the Lightning, which is the Chris Buck design pedal. That's absolutely amazing. And then actually I got the I can't remember the name of it, Nord something or other, but I got basically the clone of an OD1, which is a transparent one, and that's absolutely fantastic as well. So I love playing with those. I've still got my turbo, my old school Boss OD2, which is fantastic as well. So I'm really into the sort of stacking of the overdrives and using those with the Victory Sheriff and then the Victory head. Just gives me so much flexibility of sound. It's fantastic.
Brilliant. Okay, well, I'm just going to ask you a couple of random ones.
Go for it.
If you are playing live and you make a mistake,
yeah,
what do you do?
Yeah, just keep playing. Yeah, just keep playing through. Hope that nobody noticed. If everybody in the band noticed, then obviously apologize or smile or laugh or whatever. But yeah, just keep going. If it's in the middle of a solo, and you cock something up or your finger falls off the guitar or whatever, just pick it up where you can. Just
okay. Nobody
will notice.
Do you pull a funny face?
Yes. Yeah. I think the only thing I would say where you can't get away with it is that if you start off in the wrong key, you might as well just stop and start again. But yeah. Pull a funny face. But I'm very much an advocate of, the audience is listening to the whole band. If I cock something up, unless it's literally me playing on my own, they won't notice.
Okay. What would be your ultimate guitar goes next into your collection? Money, no object. What would you have?
Now, you see, that's an interesting question. I actually think I would probably be leaning towards, a proper... I'm not really into relict guitars. So if money was no object and I could get, a late 50s, early 60s Les Paul with P90s, I think that would be pretty amazing.
The real thing. The
real thing, but with P90s rather than humbuckers. Because honestly, the Rev Star's been a revelation to me with the P90s. They are gorgeous.
Brilliant. 2 more questions.
Go for it.
What's your best concert you've ever attended?
I've got to say the Ramones.
Amazing.
I mean, it was just alive. It was sweaty. It was, 1, 2, 3, 4, and they were in. And, yeah, that has got to be the one.
It's the life changer.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. So good. Right. So, last thing before we close then. What's next in Andrew Tate's musical journey?
That is a very good question. So I am now living on the South Coast, not far from you. And I'm working towards retirement. So I am looking forward to... So I suppose... It's an interesting thing. I do want to play in bands, and as you know, have been experimenting with a few things to see what's going to work. But really, I think from my point of view, over the last, I'm going to say 8 to 10 years, the amount of stuff that's out there on YouTube, which actually allows you to really develop musically, is amazing. I've never really taken lessons, and I went to take some lessons just sort of post COVID from a guy, because I've never been able to shred. I really would love to shred. I'm probably too old to start learning to shred now. But he said to me, okay, can you play all your major scales up and down the neck? And I couldn't. And so actually I did a few lessons with him, and I thought, actually, you know what, that's what I've got to do. So I've learned, the major scales sort of up and down the neck. So I'm much more familiar with them. And then that sort of leads into modes and triads and really sort of, unlocking the neck. So I think that when I was in the cover band, and I think this is the thing about cover bands, that, in a cover band, you learn the music. You don't necessarily sort of learn what's behind it. So for me, jamming and being able to sort of develop my creativity on the guitar is just as important as sort of playing in a band. So I've really sort of been developing that, and I think that time's always limited for me because, like because we're working. But what I really am looking forward to as the next step, really when I retire, is to be able to put some real sort of work into developing that side of it and doing some recording. I've always been into DAWs. I had sort of some of the earliest Cubase and stuff like that for, I've had them for many years and done recording with them. So developing that side of it, I think is just as important to me as playing with other people and playing in a band. But there's nothing quite like playing in a band and the excitement of, hooking up with other people. So I'd love to find something that really sort of works on that front as well.
Brilliant. So becoming that fully fledged musician. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah,
I'm sure you'll do it.
You'll do
it.
Yeah.
Right.
With you, hopefully, Darren.
Oh, yeah. I'm miles behind you, by the way, but you know that. Anyway, Andrew Tate, thank you very much. What a great chat. Nice to see you again.
Thanks, Darren. Love it.